We are live and welcome and hello everyone. Welcome to the 60-minute webinar presentation presented by CIIC, which is the acronym for the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative. This is the second in a series of behind the scenes of Catholic Impact Investing webinars, and I will be your host today. My name is John O'Shaughnessy, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Franciscan Sisters of Mary, a congregation of women religious based in St. Louis, Missouri, in the U.S. I'm also a steering committee member of CIIC, and we are very excited about our webinar today for those that we have presenting to you. And also we have 75 people signed up from 8 countries across the globe. So this truly is a global event. Before we get rolling into the content, which we are eager to do, we're going to take a moment to stop and pause and invite the Lord into this time and to offer a prayerful reflection. So, and I would invite you right now to also sort of sit back and offer this time up, this next 60 minutes, to be truly present in the moment, and I'll allow the Lord to lead us. So this, I picked this up and found out about this Catholic writer. His name's Brian Doyle, and I was just intrigued by this reflection. Unfortunately, Brian died at the age of 60 this past year, and but he left some lovely things. This piece is called I Believe. Credo, Latin for I believe, which I do very strongly in a number of things. I believe that there is a mysterious and graceful and miraculous coherence stitched through this world. I believe that this life is an extraordinary gift, a blink of bright light between vast darknesses. I believe that the fingerprints of the Maker are everywhere. Children, hawks, water. I believe that even sadness and tragedy and evil are part of that mind we cannot comprehend, but only thank. A mind especially to be thanked, oddly, when it is most inscrutable. I believe that children are hilarious and brilliant mammals. I believe that everything is a prayer. I believe that a family is a peculiar and powerful corporation, lurching toward light, webbed by love, a whole ridiculously bigger than its parts. I believe additionally that friends are family. I believe that love is our greatest and hardest work. So Lord, at this moment, we do take time to invite you into this time of ours, that it will be yours, whatever you want it to be, and that somehow this community, this global community, right now, connected as we are, will be a peculiar and powerful corporation, lurching toward light, webbed by love, a whole that is ridiculously bigger than its parts. So this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, we are ready to get into it now. And the bulk of our time, the next 45 or 50 minutes, will be focused on the Congregation of Christian Brothers European Province and their journey down the path of impact investing and fossil fuel divestments. Once we cover that, we'll finish up with a few minutes, a couple of updates, CIIC updates, and give you some ideas. If you're interested in getting more connected in Catholic Impact, we'll have some possible steps for you that we'll share, and then that will be our time. So I'd like to introduce a fellow steering committee member of CIIC, Jake Barnett. He is an institutional consultant with Greystone Consulting. Jake is located in Chicago, and he will cover with you a little bit why at CIIC we really value this tenet of sharing stories. He will also introduce our very special guests. And then when it comes time, he'll help moderate the Q&A before it all comes back to me. So Jake, welcome, and you are on.
Thank you, John, and thank you for that prayer. I'm going to keep my comments brief so we can spend the bulk of the time with the two presenters. But to give a little bit of background as to what we are trying to accomplish with these stories, the goal of CIIC is really pretty simple. It's to expand impact investment amongst Catholic institutions. And the reason for that is to ultimately to have a positive impact on people and planet. So John, as he shared previously, is going to leave this conversation with some next steps of how to get more involved, how to take additional steps on your own impact journey. But I just encourage you in the next 30 minutes as you're listening to this story to think of ways in which this might help inform you furthering what you're doing within your own institution to align your investments with your values, whatever that looks like. We are going to have about 30 minutes from Ian and Brother Edmund, at the end of which we will have some time for question and answer. But they've also both made themselves graciously available to answer any questions and have follow-on conversations regarding how different institutions can further that journey for themselves. So this is really a way in our mind to leverage this really exciting conversation around having positive impact through the resources that we as investors have been privileged to either steward or to invest. So with that said, I'm happy to hand it over to Ian Halstead and Brother Edmund Garvey. These are, Ian is the Associate Director from LP and Cantor Fitzgerald, who was the guidance for the Christian Brothers European Province, Congregation of Christian Brothers European Province. And we have Brother Edmund here with us as well to tell the story of the institution themselves. And rather than give a lengthy introduction, let me just say that this is actually our first international story ever featured through CIIC. And for me personally, a very impressive story regarding the rigor with which they have instituted this throughout their entire investment portfolio, with some very exciting metrics on the back end, showcasing how they've actually moved the needle more deliberately and more thoroughly towards a reflection of their values. So excited to hear more. And as the conversation goes on, please feel free to just ask questions, and we look forward to hearing what you have to think. But in the meantime, Ian and Brother Edmund.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ian Halstead here, and Brother Edmund here beside me from a not so sunny Dublin afternoon. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, probably morning for most people on the call, but it's great to be with you, and we look forward very much to telling the story. So we might share our presentation with you, and I'll pass over to Brother Edmund to kick off.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you, Jake and John, and thank you for this opportunity to share something of this story, which we are in fact beginning to learn more about ourselves, even as it unfolds. So we're happy to share this story, and hopefully it will generate a new kind of networking and energy among us all around the world for how we're going. So just to introduce ourselves, first of all, I belong to the European province of the Congregation of Christian Brothers. You can see that we are a canonical entity with 3 kind of separate, distinct trusts attached to it. So we've got the province, we have a province leader whom I happen to be. We've got a leadership team working with me. We have over 200 brothers, and we have charitable objectives for that. We belong to 3 distinct civil jurisdictions in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and in Britain. And trusts within those jurisdictions hold our resources in trust for the brothers, and each of those entities are subject to separate charity registrations, separate charity regulations, and separate charity reporting. And the objectives that we have, they will be probably broadly familiar to many of you already, but you can see them there in front of you. We support formal mainstream education, non-mainstream education, social and pastoral work, and other kind of activities and developments associated a lot with the tasks and the works of education. The next slide will just give you a little pictorial representation of something of what we're engaged with there. We live on a campus here beside me of a very significant teacher education college here in Marino. The Life Centre that's represented there represents non-mainstream education for people who come back and seek for a second chance. We've also got people who work with us in different ways, reaching out to the poor. The Amos Centre, which is in the bottom centre there, is a centre of spirituality and retreat, which belongs to us and we are seeking to run. And then one of the really terrific activities we have among young people, just not without mentioning them all, is what we refer to as the Edmund Rice camps, because this involves young people reaching out to less advantaged young people in different parts of Ireland and the UK. So we do seek to make an investment impact with the resources at our disposal. And some of this arose out of congregational chapters, international gatherings of brothers that took place in 2008 and in 2014, when we began to adopt as a blueprint for ourselves, making a response to our times, reflecting on how does one be brother in the world today. And a crucial thing for us is that very first sentence of the third point. It is the agenda of the world that sets our direction in mission. And so we need to listen to the world today. And as we listen to the world today, one of the people that we listen to, particularly in recent times, is Pope Francis, and particularly Pope Francis in relation to his call to and leadership to the whole question of climate change and how that is a significant challenge for us in the world today, and especially for poor people, because it is the poor of the world who are most likely to be most critically affected by the impact of climate change. And just this week, now you're looking at a slide there, Laudato Si, this is what he has said in his great encyclical on the whole thing about climate change. But just this week he said, climate change is one of the most worrying phenomena our humanity is experiencing. And his Cardinal Secretary of State said that the Holy See would work for further action to support the world's great environmental warriors. That's an interesting phrase, great environmental warriors. It's something of the measure that I think the Holy See places on the importance of not just looking after our humanity, but looking after the whole of our environment. So how do we do this? And why would we tell our story? Well, we see it as our duty in some ways to show that in working with our professional advisors, we are really trying to make a change and a difference and lead towards a transformation in how we look after, especially the poor, all of the human race, but also the whole of creation. So we also want to say to you from our experience at the moment that myths that arise that we will not do well with our investments or that we will not get really measurable and social returns and reports on how those investments are doing relative to saving the environment, they are really myths. And what we want to show you, our fellow religious and others who are keenly aware and concerned about this whole thing is what you might ask of your investors, the advice you might seek, and how you might go after strong investment policies in this whole area. So really, we have been hugely dependent upon our investment managers, our investment advisors, and the investment services that we have been given by L&P since the 1980s. And they specialize in providing high return, high impact investments. And recently they have joined the Cantor Fitzgerald group, and they're now part of that group. But they do recommend to us on impact and investments and how we can go forward. And so I'm very pleased and happy to hand over now and introduce Ian Halstead, who is Associate Director of L&P Cantor Fitzgerald, and he will bring you through, in a way I have to confess I wouldn't be able to do, but he will bring you through some of the ways in which we are seeking to have our investments work for the good of not just humanity, but the whole of the environment in which we live and move and have our being. Ian.
Thank you very much, Brother Edmund, for that very warm introduction. And we've been working together for a very long time, and we greatly appreciate your warm words there, and also your continued trust. We know that it's a great weight on your shoulders to be given the responsibility of your province's resources, and we take that very seriously. And hopefully we've looked after it very well for you. We also understand what you are trying to do in the world, with the impact that you're trying to have, and we're very cognizant of that with your investments, and have always factored that into the investment recommendations that we have given you, and have sought out impact investments that will also provide a good return as well. Going through the investment journey that we've been on, and the way that this has developed, we, like many other Catholic religious, we would have started off with an ethical investment policy that would have developed over time, how to divest from the things that you don't want to invest in, how to make sure that your portfolio is free of tobacco stocks or armament stocks, and then evolving onto a more environmental policy, an international labour policy as well, to address social justice and also governance issues as well. And then in later years, we went on to a more positive screening type of investment. Can we recommend, can we locate things that are more of a positive impact style investment, but also maintaining the strong investment returns? And then as we've developed that further, and as we've worked further through that process, we've been able to measure the impact from the divestment and investment policy and provide that to you. And hopefully that's been a good source of indication to you that you are having a positive impact, not only through the presence you want to be in the world, but also through your investments and the resources that you have. So the start of that journey really on the positive impact side, on the impact investing side, was in 2007, where we recommended and you kindly invested in 3 different investments. The first one was a World Microfinance Fund that targets investment in micro entrepreneurs in the developing world. And effectively they do that by lending some money to very small credit unions or community-based banks in the developing world, and they lend that onwards then to the micro entrepreneurs. And the impact statistics have been fantastic. 17 million people have been reached by those banks that have been supported by the fund, and the fund itself has directly reached nearly 1 million and about 150,000 employees as a result of that lending, and very much targeting female lending, which is something that we'd be very pleased and find very positive, particularly in those countries where they are trying to develop and encourage a stronger presence and a stronger set of rights for women, that they can have that access to funding so that they can develop their own businesses. We also recommended investment at the time in a clean technology fund, and then something more local here, a venture capital fund that supports businesses in Ireland, and a large number of businesses actually in Dublin, in our own city as well. So that's worked extremely well from an impact viewpoint, and also from a performance viewpoint as well. Our next stage then, we moved on in 2009 after the success, and after that it bedded down, we saw that things were going very well, and we recommended a Zambia forestry project. When we were first looking for impact investments, I suppose the world was quite a different place at that time. It was very, very difficult to find impact investments of a nature that would provide a good return as well. So we were, we wouldn't like to say we were a lone voice in the wilderness, but we were certainly struggling to find people to partner with. And what we tended to do at that stage was we set up our own investments. So the Zambia Forestry Project is an example of that, where we would have pooled investors' money similar to the European province with similar goals and put together our own forestry project, just largely due to the lack of potential positive impact investments at that time. We also recommended investment in a solar infrastructure project, forestry funds, and again, we were very interested in solar in and around that time, and we would have recommended our first solar investments. No solar funds that we were able to access, but we did find a group that were looking to raise money for a set of solar projects that they had set up in the UK. In fact, we were the first to put some money with that particular group. And it's a great success story, and I think it's a fantastic thing to be able to say, to demonstrate the power of impact investing, that very small group of people have now gone on to become the largest manager in the UK of solar assets. So there's 3 or 4 solar funds now, but these are by very much the largest. And it's very unclear whether they would have gone on to do that without the support of Brother Edmund, the European province, and like-minded investors who provided that lighthouse, that pathfinder investment for this type of investment back at an early stage when other investors didn't really want to go near it. And that's probably a great example of how Catholic religious and religious people and investors of conscience can make an impact in the world. It's not necessarily about the quantum of money. It's not necessarily about how much you put in. And people sometimes say to me, oh, we're only a small investment relative to large investments. The difference you can make as a pathfinder, as somebody who wants to shine a light on the way that other investors can follow, is absolutely enormous and should never be underestimated. So just to take a little bit of look in more detail at those investments, I'm not the best photographer in the world, so please forgive some of the photos are not great, but these are real life shots we took of the project during the years that we were there. The project went out in 2009, purchased a tract of land in Zambia, and eventually that grew to 500 hectares, about 1,300 acres of trees planted. There was a farming project put in alongside it as well. The two of them dovetailed together very well. And there was a lot of deforestation of the local area as well, because local people coming and taking the wood for charcoal. So any of the forestry thinnings or things that were done as part of the charcoal, as done as the forestry operations, the waste wood was used in a charcoal business to supply to the local community as well. As I mentioned, the agricultural business was set up. 150 people were employed, and this project has since ended, but it's an example of how much impact you can have in a relatively short period of time. The forestry and agricultural operations were sold to a UK group who've now really taken that onwards. When we first went into this part of northern Zambia, we were the first farm in that area. A number of other farms were bought around that area and started to develop after we came in. We put in some roads, and then this UK group came in behind us. They developed the area. They bought a number of farms around us, and our farm, our Zambia project now, is now the central hub of a very large farming and forestry project in that area of Zambia, and it has over 500 employees. So it's really brought on some excellent and brilliant development in a traditionally very poor area of Zambia, which is traditionally itself quite a poor country, where there's only 10% of the population is in formal employment. So to be able to develop a project like this is a wonderful thing. On the environmental impact side, the plantation forestry sequesters about 30 to 50 times of natural woodland. Academic studies have shown that. So the carbon sequestration was absolutely brilliant during the tenure of the project. 200 tons of CO2 was sequestered per annum, per hectare, for a total of about 500,000 tons by the plantings in total during the tenure of the project. And it's great to see the people working in the local economy. So one of the things that we would have had at the start of the project was the concept of work wasn't particularly, a job where you turn up week in, week out wasn't particularly familiar to the people. So bringing them in, giving them a sense of community within the project, giving them uniforms, for example, they were really took to the whole process and were delighted with it, and really became a part of the project and what was going on within the project. Housing was built for the people who wanted to live on site, who didn't want to travel, and they could move their families in as well. So we show here an example. When we first arrived, there was a number of families living near the site who wanted to become workers. You can see them on the left. After about a year, the housing was built on the right, which is fairly modest by Western standards, but nonetheless a huge advance on where they were. And we took quite a bit of advice on it as well, and generally small steps. So if you build a huge 4-bed mansion, for example, they're probably going to be very uncomfortable in that. So we've advanced the housing, and it's great to see further shots of what the UK Agricultural and Forestry Group have done. They've developed further housing on the site as well, which is great. The vegetable gardens for the workers and their families were provided as well. So the vegetable seeds, the know-how for growing, and people were able to cultivate their own vegetables using the resources and the finances of the project to improve their diet and have a better standard of living. And also boreholes were drilled on a number of different places around the project for families that they could use, so that they would have access to clean drinking water, which seriously reduced the incidence of infant mortality in the area as well, which was a great benefit on the social side. Looking at some other projects then that we had done around that time, this is a UK university and town library that was built as part of a social infrastructure project. So the Christian Brothers were very heavily involved with that, along with a number of other L&P clients, and it's still going extremely well. There's an archive and a historical reference area in the centre as well, where people can go and learn about the area. And of course, it's of amazing benefit to the university, which is situated right beside it, and to the town as well. So again, an example of something that can work extremely well on the positive impact side, but also something that performed extremely well on the investment side as well. We had also, as we mentioned, done a UK solar income project. This is a picture of the project on the Isle of Wight, and we've since, as I said, that project became the cornerstone and moved into a UK fund, and that UK fund manager has since become the largest manager of solar assets in the UK. But the fund itself has some great statistics, some great tons of CO2 offset, some excellent energy provision statistics as well, as providing a very good return for the brothers so that they can carry on their own charitable objectives as well. One of our favourite funds, and I believe it's something that's referred to quite a bit by CIIC as well, and CIIC have mentioned it a number of times, but we genuinely think it's a fantastic fund, and probably one of the best investments we'll ever do is a global renewable energy fund that targets different sub-funds within the developing world in Latin America, Africa, and in Southeast Asia. It's been investing for about 5 or 6 years now. It's going very, very well. And it's got some absolutely phenomenal impact statistics associated with it. Because of the nature of the investment manager of this fund, they're known for being extremely difficult people to deal with by investment managers. Basically because they leave no stone unturned. They do fantastic due diligence, and people know that once these guys invest, then you're onto a very good thing. They really do catalyze a lot of other money to go in behind them and with them as well. So as a result of that, they've catalyzed, or they've incentivized over €1 billion to go into these sub-funds that they're investing in. They've invested in 48 renewable energy projects. They've generated 4.3 million megawatts of renewable power, per annum at full tilt for the projects, and they're offsetting 14 million tons of CO2 equivalent, which is extraordinary statistics for the impact that's been achieved out of this fund. Provides 3.7 million households with electricity, many of which may not have had electricity without the presence of the development of this fund and how they're developing electricity markets in these target countries. Nearly 1,000 jobs created, 25,000 hours of training provided. And it's essential to point out as well just the value of what this fund is doing, because if you look at where the energy demand growth is going to be in the world in the future years, it's not going to be in Europe, it's not going to be in America, it's going to be in the developing world. And if we can get them onto a path, if the developing world can find a path onto a sustainable energy, rather than making the mistakes we did and going to polluting energy forms, that really will be a massive step towards helping to solve the climate change issue that we're all faced with at the moment. The Global Renewable Energy Fund, you can see here, is some photos of the wind projects and the solar projects that they've set up in Africa and India as well. Another thing that we've done, and we're very excited about this, is a green impact loan that we've provided to a charity here in Ireland who have come across this new way or come up with this new method of charitable giving. They just carry out their charitable giving as they do in the normal way. So they took a loan from the Christian Brothers and other LMP clients. They've purchased solar lights, helped to build efficient cooking stove, and repaired water points in their areas of activity in Zambia and in the Horn of Africa, so Eritrea and Ethiopia. And that money has just been given away, but how the investors will get a return from that is that there is a very strong environmental benefit from each of those three things. So people normally in that part of the world will use kerosene lamps, very inefficient, burn a lot of kerosene for not an awful lot of light. If you can provide them solar lights, then automatically that reduces the kerosene usage and therefore has a strong environmental benefit. The efficient cooking stoves use approximately 1/3 of the charcoal of the normal cooking methods in these countries. They're very much locally sourced, built from local produce, built in a way that the people can understand, repair themselves, and very much have the people's buy-in when they receive these cooking stones. Very important not to give them something that they won't want to use, and as soon as the charity goes away, they'll go back to cooking in the normal way. And that has verifiable reductions and massive reductions in the charcoal use in the areas where they've done. And then water points is really something we take for granted in the developed world, having water on tap, but a huge amount of water points have been under disrepair or have fallen out of usage in Ethiopia and Eritrea in particular, and this fund has gone and repaired those water points so that the people don't have to walk and then boil dirty water to make it safe for drinking, and again a very strong environmental benefit from that. Because of those strong environmental benefits, the charity is then able to generate carbon credits on the voluntary market and say, we have saved X amount of carbon dioxide, we would like that to make that available for sale. And large developed world corporations then like to go out and say for example with Toshiba, they like to say, we have offset the carbon in the making of this photocopier. And they do that by buying carbon credits on the carbon market. And this means that they're able to sell the carbon credits and repay the loan and return the money to investors with a return on top of that as well. So it's all working extremely well. They've deployed all of the loan already into the Horn of Africa and in Zambia, and they've sold the first year's carbon credits as well, which is great. So they're proving the concept that it works extremely well. They're going to make a return of money to investors shortly. They're going to use a lot of the money to follow on into projects as well in the first couple of years and further expand out the projects that they're doing. So it's all going to plan. The one bit that we hadn't anticipated, so carbon credits run for 7 years and normally you sell them year to year to year. But because of the strength, because of the social benefits a large European corporation has said, we don't want your carbon credits for 1 year, we'd like them for the full 7 years. So they're actually way ahead of where they were thinking on the sale of the carbon credits. So on a financial investment side, this investment is working extremely well. What we really got involved in this for, and what attracted Brother Edmund and the province to it, was the impact that it has, though. And this is a very, very small investment that was made, but it's affected nearly 140,000 people. It's providing 300 million litres of clean water per annum. The charity were telling me that out of all of the water points in Eritrea, approximately half of the boreholes and water points were broken before this fund came in last year. They have now repaired all of those water points. So they've literally gone out and repaired half of the water points in Eritrea. I thought that was just a staggering statistic, and it's brilliant to think of what an impact that's having on people's lives. Just even thinking of people trudging all that way, 6.9 million hours of hours saved in collecting the firewood and the water, and 178,000 euros worth, about $200,000 worth of money saved. Might not sound like a lot to you and me, but in that part of the world, that has an enormous impact. 220,000 tons of CO2 and 40% reduction in waterborne disease. 220,000 tons of CO2 has been saved as well. So truly a great development, and a truly great project for a relatively small amount of money. So with the backing of Brother Edmund and his blessing, we've gone out and we've had a further discussion with Vita, and we've been talking to this Irish charity and saying, if you can do this with a small amount of money, what could you do with a much larger amount of money? They've come up with a lot of different ideas on this. The carbon market is due to expand massively, and I'm not too sure if you may have heard, but the airlines, the international airline industry, have decided to join the carbon market. So the voluntary carbon market is now going to expand by about 3 or 4 times over the next couple of years. So there's a huge opportunity to further develop this, and we're in discussions about a follow-on investment, and we hope that our investors will support us on that. Because if we can do this with a small amount of money, we're really excited about what might be possible with a much larger fund. It's very important for us, and we very much like to report back to Brother Edmund and our investors on the impact that this is having. We know from the statistics and the discussions there that we are having a strong impact, but we really like to measure that. We really like to be able to say, yes, we are having an impact, and here's the proof. So we go out to an external agency, we run all the investments through that, we parse and review all the investment reports from all of the managers, and we're able to say, for every million invested, in comparison to an average portfolio of equities and bonds, a typical L&B investor like Brother Edmund and the province are able to invest their portfolio but have 1/3 of the carbon emissions of a normal portfolio. And we're looking at some new investments before the end of the year, particularly investments in carbon sink type investments that will be able to reduce that to or below zero. And we're very excited about that, because I think it'd be a fantastic thing to be able to say that we invest in lots of different companies, we invest in lots of different impact projects, but the sum total of that is we are actually drawing carbon out of the atmosphere rather than putting carbon into the atmosphere from that activity. And that really will be a fantastic thing to be able to say. Fossil fuel reserves is another key thing that we would look at then. You'll see here from this chart, the average portfolio is in the red, and our clients, like Brother Edmund, will be in the blue. Now, there's no problem with the screen or anything like that. There isn't actually any blue bars there. The reason being that we have gone fully fossil fuel free across all our portfolios. So for anyone who's thinking about going fossil fuel free or has made the pledge and is wondering how to do it, there are funds out there, there are plenty of investments out there. It is absolutely possible to go fully fossil fuel free, and this is the statistics that we want to continue to see and report to our investors, that you have no reserves at all of coal, gas or oil within your portfolio or owned by any of the companies within your portfolio. The other key thing as well, if you want to have a positive impact, it's great to be able to divest from fossil fuel companies. It's a brilliant signal. It's a great thing, particularly if you make that knowledge available to the world and say, we're divesting, we think you should too. But the other side of the coin is you want to invest in the climate solutions. You want to be able to say, yes, we are investing in these things, and we have a measurable impact from it. And the key metric for us is how much renewable power is being generated from your portfolio. We're delighted to be able to report that the Christian Brothers portfolio produces 30 times the renewable energy of a average balanced portfolio, and that's the kind of impact that we want to see from the investments that we're making. So in conclusion, pass over to Brother Edmund.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for sharing that story. It's a relatively new story to me personally and to my fellow trustees, but I find it terrifically exciting, and I think it puts us right at the heart of where we need to be in the 21st century. And I'm really grateful to LNP for the advice, for the encouragement, the cajolement that they've given us, and for inviting us to take the risk steps that we needed to take, because we were entering new places. And for me, with my responsibility, I need to be able to hold on to my money and to grow it and to make sure that we can do everything with it, and to see that we've done what we've done with the guidance of LNP and make what I call for us the invisible impacts that we're having. I just find that hugely encouraging at the moment. And it is wonderful to be able to see that not only can you hold your value, can you grow your portfolio, can you pay your bills, but you can actually begin to measure the impact that is all having in a global context. So I just want to express deep gratitude to LNP. I also grateful for the opportunity to share this story with you. And I look forward to being energized even more by it as we see it developing into the future. And I'll end with the words of Pope Francis again. He says, we must regain the conviction that we need one another, that we have a shared responsibility for others and for the world. And he finishes and he says, and that being good and decent are worth it. LNP have shown us that this way is really worth it in all kinds of ways.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for sharing that story. Really wonderful to hear. I think lots to learn from and take away from in terms of the different discussions. We have a couple of questions that have come in. The first is relatively straightforward, which is there going to be a replay of this available? Yes, there will be. We're going to work through that and send that as a follow-up. So if you just want to watch this again because it's so exciting, or if you want to share it to somebody else to hear about the story secondhand, please feel free to do that. We will be happy to do that. The other question is from one of our listeners, which is, what is the impact on your income from these investments? So speaking from kind of an income cash flow standpoint, I guess, Ian, what's some of the impact been on that front?
Yeah, certainly one of the things that has constantly surprised us about looking in the area of impact investing, and particularly impact investing that would also have a good return associated with it, is just how strong and how good the investments are themselves from an investment viewpoint. There's always seems to be in this area this idea that you're giving something up by going into these type of investments. You must be losing out. You can't possibly do good and do well from your investments at the same time. And that certainly hasn't been our experience at all. In fact, looking at the income, the actual returns and the actual cash flow coming from these investments, the solar investments that we've made, the social infrastructure investments that we've made, the forestry investments that we've made, have actually been among the most successful and the best investments. We would almost see these as everyone knows that bonds just don't do for charities what they used to do. A charity used to be able to put a lot of money in bonds and get a 4 or 5% reasonably secure return every year, those days are just gone. And in America, I know things are getting a little bit better for people who still adhere to that. But in Europe, our banks are actually starting to write to us now and tell us they're going to start charging us for deposits. And the bonds, if you get 0% per annum out of your bonds, you're doing well. So moving into things like solar, moving into things like infrastructure, moving into things like forestry, where they're still relatively secure and they have a very good income. To our mind, they're the new bonds. They're the way the bonds used to be for charity investors, and they make a great replacement for those bonds in this new world that we find ourselves. So the impact has been nothing but positive on the investment returns and on the income that we've seen from the investments.
Great.
So one sort of tack-on question that I have, Ian and Brother Edmund, has to do with the returns sound good on these investments. What are some of the issues? Are you facing any issues around liquidity of these investments? Are these, given that some of these are private, how do you factor that into your overall investment program?
Yes, it's a very good question. Certainly back in the early days, so our 2007 investments, 2009 investments, they were almost exclusively private because we were looking at, as I said, we weren't the lone voice in the wilderness, but we were very much, we really struggled to find other people who would partner with us or would come in with us to do these type of investments. So really the private investments was the only route to get access to these type of investments. But when we roll on about 10 years from then, there's a new range of investment funds that have now become available. We're just running the rule at the moment over a global renewable infrastructure fund that invests in America and Europe. It'll have a very large market cap. It'll be listed on the stock exchange. You can buy and sell those shares every day. So the liquidity concerns have almost entirely faded on these type of investments over time. We still think there's a value. There's obviously a better investment return associated with private investments, otherwise no one would do them. So there is still a place for some private investments within a portfolio, but the whole idea that impact investments, you have to go private, has really gone now at this stage. There's just a large number of listed, available on the stock exchange funds that you can now go into that have these very strong positive impact associated with them as well.
Great, thank you.
Got another question, and this I think is a really interesting one. Is LMP supported by any NGO for the implementation of the projects in the Global South? If this is the case, are there specific criteria for the partnership? And to just kind of broaden out that, I would be curious to hear you've talked some about the idea of, engaging with the community to learn more about how to appropriately implement some of these projects. So if it wasn't an NGO, kind of what did that partnership, what did that engagement look like in other circumstances?
Yes, it's a very good question. Yeah, in a lot of the cases, we would partner with NGOs. On the Zambia Forestry Project, we partnered with some local people who would have been very familiar with the area, would have known the area, would have known business practices, would have known social practices within the area. And that was, even with that help and assistance, it was quite a steep learning curve for us. So thankfully, we didn't make any mistakes or we didn't disadvantage anyone. But you could easily see how you could do that within that kind of setting. So in the more recent ones that we are doing, we're very much keen on partnering with NGOs who would have a very strong presence in the area, would have a very strong track record, would understand the area. So partnering with this Irish charity as we are at the moment, and they're really doing all of the work and we're providing the capital and the know-how and the finance. That's working extremely well. They're doing what they've done in the Horn of Africa for 30 years. We're just providing the finance and the overlay for that. So that they can get on with their charitable work. And I think that's a really powerful connection. It's a really powerful partnership that gives them a great platform to go out and do what they need to do, but also gives the investment returns and the positive impact that investors like Brother Edmund and the Christian Brothers need.
Brother Edmund, for your journey as a religious, what advice would you have to other either staff people or leadership that might be listening to this call about how to effectively take that leap, how to get comfortable and make their ensuing investment committees and staff comfortable with really making as progressive and robust a commitment to this space as you all have?
Well, what advice would I have? I would say that from our experience, listen very carefully to your financial managers, your investment managers. Listen to the kind of advice that you're getting. Pay attention to whether you're getting any suggestion or advice about moving in the direction in which we're moving. And the other advice I would have is that if you're getting advice to turn and move in this direction, our experience, as I think I've probably said already, but our experience would show us that it has in fact been a great advantage to us. It's not only been a financial advantage, but I think it has been a huge ethical and moral advantage to us, whereby we see impact which is beyond the financial and is largely invisible to us, but it's there and it's growing. So I would say listen to your investment managers. If they're turning up with suggestions and advice, pay attention to it, because it is advantageous, even financially, but I think it's advantageous in all kinds of other ways. If you're not getting suggestions and advice in that way, I think one of the learnings for us now would be to keep pursuing the questioning of our investment managers to see, is there further that we can do? Because if we don't have a planet that's sustainable and protected, then everything else that we're trying to do that is immensely good will be unsustainable, really, in the longer term. So we've got to really change our mindset and our consciousness about how we are in relationship, not just with our finances, but with the whole of the planet and the whole of humanity. And this is the God-given thing that we've been given.
I wonder if I could just do one quick follow-up to that, Brother Edmund, and that is, what sort of internally, what is your structure like for making decisions around moving into impact investments, for example? We're seeing that that's a struggle for a good number of groups that might have investment committees, but really are very hesitant to consider anything that might sort of be in the realm of private investments, or those that might have ESG or even divestment possibilities, thinking out of hand that those are automatically going to be concessionary in terms of returns. So how is it in your group? What sort of structure do you have for considering changes to policy?
Well, I mean, in each of the sectors that I described for you at the beginning, each sector has its own set of trustees, whether it's in the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, or England. And the trustees receive regular reports from our advisors and from our investment managers. And we meet from time to time with the investment managers. And then it would go back to our advisors. We question the reports and we analyze them. And the trustees have to make the judgment calls on the basis of the advice that they receive. It's not solely my task or responsibility. I simply chair most of these bodies, but I have a number of trustees around with me. But on an ongoing basis, then, we're monitoring, again with the help of our advisors. We're always seeking their help, their expertise, and their suggestions going forward. But it's the trustees who make the decisions about how do we move. I'm not sure if that exactly answers your question.
Yeah, that does. Thank you very much.
So we are just coming up to our last 5 minutes of the conversation. I There are a couple of questions that are floating in, and we will be happy to connect those moving forward, but we want to make sure that we stay on time and give some time for wrap up. So I just want to take a moment to thank Ian and Brother Edmund for all that they've done and for sharing their story with us. Certainly found it to be an impressive story and a very strong story. If we did not get to your question today, or if you have any follow-up questions for them, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or John or the email info@catholicimpact.org. Ian has graciously made himself available, and anything that he is not able to answer, he's happy to rope in Brother Edmund to the conversation, so we hope to keep it going. But I'm going to hand it over to John just to give us a final closeout and some updates on CIIC.
Great, and thanks from me as well for the really informative, timely, and valuable materials that you presented, Brother Edmund and Ian. Thanks so much. A couple of quick updates. We have, I'm going to back up. Two updates for CIIC. One is that there is a new publication that was issued and released just yesterday, prepared and authored by Troicare in Ireland and the Global Catholic Climate Movement. It is entitled Ethical Investments in the Era of Climate Change. So this is really I have read it. It is a very thorough toolkit approach for anyone and any institution that is looking at considering seriously how they might modify to their investment program, and some steps to go through to lead one to a change along those lines. So I strongly recommend that you can get this from, if you go to the Global Catholic Climate Movement website, you can download it from there. We also have a link at CatholicImpact.org, that's CIIC's website. If you go to the resource section, that will take it to you as well. We also are very pleased to announce, in addition to CIIC's steering committee, that is Matt Ziegler, who is with Catholic Charities USA, and he is their senior director for impact investing and social entrepreneur, a wonderful addition to our now 6-member steering committee. Welcome, Matt. A few things, if you would like to get more connected into Catholic Impact, one great way to do this is to go to the CIIC website, actually the homepage, and at the bottom you can put your name and email address input that, and you will receive all future updates that come from CIIC, including news about future webinars, postings to our website, including stories. We expect to have around 6 stories posted to the CIIC website, new ones next year. Tell us your story. We'd love to hear from you about what it is that you see happening, and with the idea that others could benefit and learn from your experiences. So, and again, reach out about your own impact journey. And if you'd like to get even more involved with CIIC, there is room on our 2 subcommittees, the peer-to-peer, which is how we communicate with others, largely through our website platform, and also a membership outreach committee as well. So again, you can do that through the info CatholicImpact.org web email address, or to Jake or I individually. And just spread the word. If this is something that you found valuable today, just let other people know about it. Let them know about our website and where you can sign up. So with that, we are right at 59 minutes. And so again, thanks to Brother Edmund, Ian, Jake, and all who signed in. We look forward to seeing you the next time, and have a blessed day and a blessed weekend. And thank you very much. Have a great day.